This week's episode of Loki, much better than last week's. I liked last week's episode, like I said in my review of that one, but most of it I felt was just playing catch-up. Not a lot really happened. It was just sort of a recap of Season 1, trying to catch up with the characters and remind the audience of what was going on because it was such a long wait between this season and last season. This week, now that we've gotten all that out of the way, the plot was a lot more exciting, and it's more along the lines of what I was hoping Season 1 was going to be. I was hoping the premise of the announced it was sort of going to be like Marvel's version of Doctor Who in a way, going through time and stopping various threats or causing mischief because he's got a mischief. This episode felt more like that, with a little bit of Men in Black thrown in, and I thought the villain in this episode was fantastic. He's charismatic and threatening just like Loki, which makes them a great dynamic, and I thought the scene with Loki interrogating him was a nice callback to Avengers 1, where Black Widow interrogates Loki and ends up getting the information she needs out of him by acting like he's winning. It was like that scene, except this time Loki's the one using the reverse psychology tactics. Remember, this is still technically Avengers 1 Loki. Thor the Dark World, he doesn't remember anything that happened. He doesn't remember anything that happened in Ragnarok or any of the other movies that he was in. Avengers 1 is where his memory stops. And so he's still classified as a villain, which is what this episode kind of explores a bit more. Can he put his villainous ways aside, or is what Brad, who's the villain in this episode, is what he says true? Is he truly a villain? Owen Wilson has a great dynamic with everybody on this show. The way he bounces back and forth with snappy dialogue with Tom Hiddleston and this week's villain was great. I liked how this episode fleshed out the relationship with Loki and Sylvie. It was fun seeing them work together in the third act. I am a bit disappointed that OB, who is my personal favorite character from last week's episode, was not in this episode as much, because I really enjoyed him, but that's okay, because the villain in this episode somewhat filled that void. The stakes of the season have now been established, and I'm hoping this show keeps building its momentum. Let me know what you thought of this week's episode of Loki in the comments, and I'll see you next week.